Yeah.
So this year we came down and we put it on the turbocharger, and I guess it took us 2 tries to really start it. Once we got it started, Chris started it on Sunday. He probably drove it around the block with the AC on, and that was it. He parked it, and then of course it wouldn't start. So then we put it on the charger for longer, and I said, okay, I hear you have to drive for at least a half an hour. We drove it down the Beach for 40 minutes, down to Edgewater, back up, past every gas station I know, charging the battery. And it was fine. And it improved. Like the first 20 minutes, it was so bad at the stop street that I had to think streets that didn't have stops. I had to go out on Dixie Highway and I had to do Riverside Drive because I couldn't sit in idle. It was going to stall and I was going to be dead in the water. So 40 minutes later, I'm like, boy, it's feeling pretty good. Okay, we got it started, we got it charged, we'll be done. Go out to do the groceries the next day. Nothing. So we put it on the charger again, and it came up to full charge instead, but it wasn't starting. And I said, listen, I'm just not willing to put any money. I know it's a battery, but I'm just done. And the expenses of registering it, insuring it, for third party, all this stuff for Florida. I said, you might as well just not use it. Don't drink. I just put it out on the auto train. In the meantime, I put some crap on. Last year I had failed to do it somehow or other. We got called and I got in charge and I know. Well, we have rented now for a month.
How much to rent a car for a month?
800.
Yeah, we just checked that out. Thinking that, we're selling the car now, so we can slide back to the summer.
Yeah. But you know what, Gilly? My insurance is $600 a year. The registration is another $100. When I add all that up, I got oil change or some sort of repair, the battery died, the tire's not good, this or that. Some sort of repair bill, $400 or $500 on that. By the time I'm done adding that up, and I need the car per month, I might as well rent the car for a month and not own it.
Sure.
It's Uber today to go to the Enterprise. They probably would have put this up, but I wanted to test it because
Yeah.
so I just got it the day before, and I had been opposed to it because I said it's irresponsible. I said no, my kids and grandkids do this. They tell me it's good. They'll try it. So we used it Uber. It was a piece of cake. It was $13 to get us set up. And we rented for a month. And furthermore, they say you could drop the car off at Daytona Airport with no drop charge. So we don't even have airport to worry about arranging. I know you take this one. But they said, oh no, you can drop it at the airport, it'll be fine. We're close enough, it doesn't matter.
Which airport?
Stay tuned. He's fine back then. So, in all, I think
Check, 1, 2. Thomas, are we ready for video? Good. All right, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
How are we feeling tonight?
good.
Yeah, good? Good. Beautiful day. Nice weather. Let's go ahead and get settled in. My name is Philip Vesky. I'm the Public Information Officer here for the City of New Smyrna Beach. Let's just go ahead and knock out some real quick kind of tabletop housekeeping here. We've got some things on it for you. We've got some snacks, right? If you're thirsty, we've got ice cold bottle of water right there on the side. You've got some blank note cards that you can use with those blue big pens to fill out any questions, comments, input that you have. So what we're going to do is we're going to have all of our guest speakers here speak first, and then before the end of the last presentation, I'm going to go ahead and circulate around the room and collect those cards from you, right? And then after the last presentation, we'll have a Q&A panel where we'll ask all of the guest speakers up here your questions, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. If you think of a question during the Q&A panel, right, and you want to ask one, just go ahead and bring it up to the stage here. I'll be up here kind of passing the mic back and forth to these guys. I'll go ahead and just kind of get it from you and work it into the deck, okay? Any questions around the room? Okay, great. Let's go ahead and kick things off. Welcome to the Coastal Community Resiliency Session on Transportation. This is the last proper CCR session here. The next one's going to be on November 27th. But that's more of a program wrap-up, right? That's kind of got to be like, hey, here's everything we did, here's everything we have, and here is where we are going with this information. Okay, so let's talk about the last CCR real quick. We got these 12 questions from our guests, and just looking around the room here, the number of people we have, I know we can do better than that, all right? So let's really put our thinking caps on. Let's get some great questions for these guys, and I'll tell you why. Because we take these questions here, and this is what we do with them. Right? This is part of our strategic action plan for the CCR. So kind of from left to right, the way we put it together is, first we take all your cards, we read every single one, and we identify trends. We say, hey, what are people talking about? What are people concerned about? Right? So this is an example from the public safety CCR that we had back in May. So we had 3 supporting comments. You can see in the 3rd column there. It says, what type of regular crime reporting can be shared with the public? Surely the chief receives daily and weekly crime summaries. As a beachside hotelier, I would like to have current advisories of issues happening on beachside, i.e. car and room break-ins, credit card fraud. And finally, 3rd comment that we got was, which area of NSB is safest and which is unsafest? Right, so we saw these 3 comments and we said, hey, I'm noticing a trend here. People are hungry for more knowledge about crime activity here in New Smyrna Beach. So we developed this recommendation. Let's develop and disseminate a publicly available crime activity report. Right? And in the CCR, as it was happening, as we got these questions, Chief Mike Coffin, he highlighted the FDLE, that's the Florida Department of Law Enforcement website, as a resource for historical crime data, right? And he added, after that, right, the CCR was in May, later in the summer, he added daily crime logs to the police department's website, right? And I'll just go ahead and show you here on the next slide. There they are, right there at the bottom right. That little daily patrol log with the red siren on it. So if you go to the New Smyrna Beach Police Department's website, you roll down there, you click on that, you can see police reports directly from the officers on patrol as they post them. Right? So now so really this kind of became, okay, so we're already, this was already in development. This is something that we already have now. So this is now kind of, okay, let's have the police department keep doing this. Now it's a police PIO and city PIO responsibility to get that knowledge out there, to make sure people know about it, right? So, this isn't the only one. We have lots of recommendations like these built on the input that you guys put on those blank note cards out there, right? So what we do after this, we put them all together, and then we bring them before the neighborhood council. That's a citizen-based advisory board that we have here in New Smyrna Beach, and we say, hey guys, here are our recommendations. What do you think? And they go ahead and they look at them, and we kind of talk about, we do a recap of the CCR, we share our thoughts and discussions with each other, and they rank them, right? So let's say that this is just 1 of 5 recommendations that apply to the police department. They would all go ahead and rank them individually, right, and independently. We would go ahead and average those rankings, and then come out with a final neighborhood council ranking for all, let's say in this case there are 5 recommendations for the police department. Then the city commission, in their strategic planning session in December, will get all of these recommendations, those very same ones the neighborhood council got, and they'll look at it and say, okay, looks like this one has 3 comments here. Looks like there's another comment about we need to retrofit municipal buildings with solar panels. That got 30 comments. All right, so maybe I'll put a little bit more weight on that. This is how the neighborhood council ranked it. This is what their priorities are, as representatives of the different neighborhoods here in New Smyrna Beach. This is how I'm going to rank it. So they'll rank it using the same method that the neighborhood council uses, and that will form the 2019 initiatives, right? At that point, it'll fan out to all the different departments here in the city, and they'll say, okay, hey, neighborhood council likes this, city commission likes this, and that way they can go ahead and kind of prioritize their resources. Say, well, we got to work on this, and then maybe we can go ahead and tackle those lower priority items later. So it gives us direction, and it comes directly from your input, all right? So I'm looking forward to getting some great comment cards from you here tonight. Okay, and again, there's the example of the police website. So we're here tonight, though, to talk about transportation, right? So without further ado, let's go ahead and kick things off. We've got John Cheney with Volusia County. He's the director of the traffic engineering division here, and we're going to go ahead and break it up into two panels. Our first two speakers are going to be talking about the current state of affairs in transportation, right? What's happening right now? How does the development review process work? And then our second two speakers, they'll talk about what's the future here in NSV, right? Let's talk about autonomous vehicles. Let's talk about new trends in intelligent and adaptive traffic signal systems. Let's talk about the trail system here in New Smyrna Beach, right? How are we going to build out this master trail plan that we have? So without further ado, John?
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is John Cheney. I'm the Director of Traffic Engineering for Volusia County. What that means to you all is that my agency provides 24/7 service to all your traffic lights on federal, state, county, and city roads. We also perform traffic engineering studies for you all if requested. Most of our requests are on South Atlantic Avenue regarding speeding issues. What I've been asked to talk about tonight is the current transportation and funding. We have a very rich history of transportation in Volusia County that goes way back, and we're going to be talking not only of the future, but of the past. This is a map countywide that shows all of the roads and other projects that have been constructed over the past 5 years and are programmed for the next 5 years. What you want to focus on is Southeast Volusia and the New Smyrna Beach area. What we are currently constructing, and you see 10th Street, Park Avenue, I-95 are projects, a lot of intersection works, and that's a combination of traffic signals and also what we call rectangular rapid flashing beacons or leading LEDs on the pedestrian signs. And our biggest project from the county is the Turnbull Bay Bridge. We are also partnering with the Florida Department of Transportation. They're currently designing a traffic adaptive system on State Road 44 from the airport that will go all the way to the beach. What that means is that the signal timings right now are based on time of day. So we take one count out of 365 days and say, this is how it's going to work for the rest of the time. Traffic adaptive keeps polling all the cars on the network and tries to minimize the delay, and so it will sequence a lot faster through the cycle. Now, going back to our capital improvement projects, again, the Turnbull Bay Bridge. Good news is we hope to have that completed before this Christmas. The Turnbull Bay and Pioneer Trail, that curve project is already done. As we move over to the next big project, 10th Street, between Edgewater and New Smyrna Beach, we're glad that we've completed the property swap with the city of Edgewater, with the city, a developer, and us. The developer will build us a new pond, a retention pond, to help collect the nutrients and clean up the water prior to going into the river. Unfortunately, we're still working with FEC Railroad. We've been working with them for the last 9 years, trying to get an agreement in place, and we're still struggling with that. In fact, the council today asked that we partner with the Florida Department of Transportation and their rail office to see if we can move things along. So, part of the thing I want to talk about today was, do we have transportation issues? Everything is relative. And so what you perceive is going to be different than what I perceive. As it relates to daily congestion, looking countywide and then just focusing on Southeast Volusia, this is what we're looking at for a 24-hour weekday. You see no orange, blue, yellows, or greens, which means to us that the roads can handle the traffic and there's available capacity at this time. If I talk to you all, you're going to say, John, you're crazy. And that's because what you see is the traffic congestion on a daily basis. You know those major intersections where it's always, you're gonna have to wait and everything like that. The 44 corridor, Flagler Avenue. And again, when we're looking at this, typically we're looking at the weekday. We always know there's a summer beach season. We know the snowbirds will be arriving sometime near Thanksgiving and leaving near Easter. And so we do account for that. We do coordinate with the city and the Florida Department of Transportation when the summer beach season is coming. Typically what we do is we have a big powwow and we ask how are we going to handle the traffic. You can see the beach ramp counts. That's from 2016 and it's still somewhat reflected. Now that's the top 8 locations and most of those are in New Smyrna Beach. The DOT corridor study, that's being refreshed. So hopefully there'll be some good news coming out of that. Another thing that we look at is crashes, high crash locations throughout Volusia County. Again, looking throughout all of Volusia County, your top crash is number 20 countywide. And it goes from number 20 to number 50. But looking at the high crash locations, you would expect them at the major signalized intersections, and that's basically where they are. As it relates to the county's long-range transportation plan, our comprehensive plan, this is what you're looking at for all of East Volusia. Everything in red is what we believe will need to be widened someday in the, by 2025. There's a need based on computer modeling and stuff like that. What you also see is some feeder lines and saying out of all those projects, only 2 of them are currently funded. One of those that is currently funded is 10th Street. And again, focusing on Southeast Volusia. You'll notice at this time, or at the time we developed this, there was no 4-laning of Pioneer Trail being looked at the time. Moving to transportation funding. Everyone's fun and joy. We're going to be talking about impact fees. We're going to be talking about local option gas taxes. And then we'll be talking about something that no one wants to talk about. So what is an impact fee? It's, in general, it provides local governments with a funding source for new and expanding developments and public facilities. So when a developer builds, he's consuming capacity on the county roads, the city roads. And so he's paying for that consumption. And the impact fee is based on that consumption. And it's also based on local data. Here's the ugly formula. This is the one everyone says it's too complicated to understand. We have approximately 40 land uses, so we have to use this formula of 40 different land uses to generate a impact fee for the land use. So we're talking about trip generation, external new trips, average trip lengths, distribution factors, construction cost per lane mile, or per lane mile capacity, and also credits. We have to give credits to the developers because if it's a residential development, the new residents will be paying for gas. And so that needs to be given as a credit. When we're looking at impact fees, again, amongst all of us, and I've highlighted New Smyrna Beach, there's different impact fees for the different public facilities. What I highlighted in yellow is the county thoroughfare impact fee as it's currently configured for a single family home. You'll notice it's uniform, and that's basically everything's added up linearly to get a total. So if a new developer is building anywhere in the county, that's the numbers that they would look to be paying as part of that development. If it's a development that's greater than 55, typically they don't pay the school impact fee. So once we collect the money, where can we spend the money? It can only be spent on the thoroughfare roads in the zone that the impact fee is collected. There's 4 zones. There's 2 on the east side, 2 on the west side. One of the recommendations for the new impact fee study is whether or not we should consolidate the 4 zones to 2 zones. They cannot be used for maintenance, and they cannot be used to address deficiencies. And the colored roads that you see up there, that's the county thoroughfare road network. So when we're looking at the history of expenditures, where did we collect it and where did we spend it? And you'll see each of the zones and the relative magnitude of how much we're collecting and how much we're spending. You notice zones 1, Daytona Beach, Port Orange, Ormond Beach, and zone 3, Deltona, Orange City, and DeBary are collecting the highest and we're spending the highest, whereas zones 2, New Smyrna Beach, Edgewater, and zone 4, DeLand, we collect less. Now, moving on to local option fuel taxes, local option gas taxes. This is the money coming in, the pennies per gallon. And we get basically 12 pennies for the county and state. We get about 3 pennies. There's a total revenue, and then we split that based on a formula between the county and each of the cities. Again, the big thing to remember here is the gas tax revenue is based on pennies per gallon, not on the price per gallon. No matter what the cost of the gasoline, we're only collecting those 15 pennies. It's not indexed or anything like that like the state DOT does. And a lot of times we get a question about, okay, what is that city formula distribution? And again, this is something county didn't do. Cities amongst themselves came up with this formula. 1/3 the taxable assessed property value, 1/3 population, and 1/3 current lane mileage. Now, looking at this last fiscal year, this is how much money we collected in impact fees and the 5 cents gas tax. And why is the 5 cents gas tax important? Because it can only be spent on roadway capacity projects. And you'll see with the impact fees, we get about $3 million, and that's divided into residential and commercial. Now, the county did a bond, a $65 million bond, back when the economy was booming to get ahead of our different road deficiency projects. We are still paying back that bond. It's about $4.5 million. So if we use the impact fees to pay down the bond, and because we've been short of the impact fees, we're now having to use local option gas taxes to pay back the bond. So the remaining available money for capacity is about $4.8 million. If it costs $6 million to widen the road from 2 to 4 lanes, we can build less than 1 mile of road. The good news is we pay off the bond in 2024. With regards to the status of the county impact fees, I would encourage everyone to come back next Wednesday, the 24th. The county staff will be here to go over the results of the county impact fees. We desperately encourage you to provide comments, whether you think, raise them all the way or keep them the way they are. We're okay with whatever you want to tell us, advise us, comment on. I was also noted that New Smyrna Beach has also begun the process of updating their road impact fee. So this is the topic we don't want to talk about. What are other funding sources that exist? You have sales tax, you have mobility fees, you have combinations, and this basically just shows different jurisdictions and counties in Florida that are trying these new approaches. The elected officials roundtable came up with the concept of a half-cent sales surtax. What this illustrates is, again, based on the funding formula that was agreed upon by the elected officials in the roundtable, this is how the money would be distributed. County would get about $22 million. New Smyrna Beach would get about $1.5 million. So What will we do with that money? Again, through the elected officials roundtable, each of the city staffs, the county staffs, we work together in partnership to come up with opportunities for potential projects. For road widening is Airport Road, Pioneer Trail, 10th Street. For new roads, the extension of Williamson Boulevard from Pioneer Trail to State Road 44, the 10th Street extension from Tatum all the way to Old Mission, and the Park Avenue extension, which was a project proposed by Edgewater. I think the 10th Street extension from Old Mission back over to Glencoe Road, that was another city project that was proposed. With regards to intersections and interchanges, I-95 at Pioneer Trail is a potential project, 44 at Mission Wallace, 44 at Canal, Myrtle, 44 US 1 in Park, US 1 in Turkey. With regards to 44 Mission Wallace and 44, there was a study done by the River to Sea TPO in cooperation with the Florida DOT and you all. There were public hearings on a proposal to improve that intersection. That application has been, basically was a study of what could be done. We got feedback from you all on what should be done and told us how to do it. And now we've basically taken the results and recommendations of that study and submitted it back to the River Sea TPO to implement. So again, we're waiting to hear whether or not there's funding for that project. Finally, I'm just the county governor. You don't want us telling you how your community should be. We're here to assist us, just like all my colleagues. We're here to help you. But at the end of the day, it's your community. It's your quality of life. If we're getting anything wrong, if you don't want to widen the road, you're okay with congestion, tell us. I mean, do you want to be like International Speedway? Do you want to be like Dunlop now, where it's dangerous to cross so many lanes? Again, it's in your hands on how you want your community to look. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Wallace, who will talk about the current development review process. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Good to have you all here tonight. Appreciate it. As John was saying, I mean, we recognize that transportation is such a big issue. I've been a transportation engineer. I'm with Traffic Engineering Data Solutions and been working in this industry for 24 years. Our firm's in DeBerry. I've been working in the Volusia County area for nearly 20 years. So certainly, you know, when projects come forward, the first thing people grab onto right away is the transportation because it affects your every day that you all live. We recognize that you all have, you know, everybody's got a different perspective on transportation, and it's always good to hear. And what I want to do is talk about the development review process, give you all a little bit of education of what we do when we're looking at traffic impact studies, because we have a lot of rules and standards that we have to follow when we're looking at development. And so, we're one of the city's consultants, so as a traffic impact study comes in, we assist the city in reviewing the study. So when is a study required? There's a lot of different development approval steps, and there's TIAs. We'll talk about traffic impact analysis. The acronym we always use is the TIA. It's required at different levels, but the one I'm going to hit on is the bottom one. When we get a site plan or preliminary plat in, that's when we have the engineering drawings and we really know what development we've got in the driveway connections. That's when we get into what's called a concurrency study. We know the details of the impacts, and we got to figure out if the roads are broken or not, and then we also got to figure out how does the development address its impacts in terms of mitigation. And so initially, who's involved? The developer is going to retain a transportation engineer to prepare the study, and they'll submit it to the city. City staff will review it. The city will retain a consultant like Ted's, our firm, as well as others, to review the study. Now, if the development has connection to a state roadway such as 44 or a county roadway like Pioneer Trail, then Volusia County or DOT staff would also be involved in the review of the study as well. And what's the basis for the study? Well, the River to Sea TPO established TIA guidelines, basically a methodology, guidance for every study that comes in, so everybody's playing by the same rules. And all the cities in Volusia County, as well as the county itself, all have the exact same standards, so everybody's being treated equal. The key thing of all this when we get a TIA is what's the level of service standard. And the level service standards basically are the thresholds for what is acceptable, when is a roadway or intersection breaking. And that's the key point for us when we're looking at these studies, that we have to first look at this level of service. Now, every city in the state has a comprehensive plan, and so does City of New Smyrna Beach. And in transportation policy, 4.B are the level service standards, and that tells us again what point do we have to make improvements to the roadways. Level service is like a report card. Basically, level service A through F. A, of course, is ideal. No traffic on the roadway. F, you know what that means. That's congestion and gridlock. So level service basically is, as you can see, a qualitative measure used to identify the roadway intersection, the level at which a roadway intersection operates. And we have certain performance measures that are quantified. Average delay at an intersection, average travel speed on a roadway. We have tools to estimate all this information in these different performance measures. Now, in terms of the City of New Smyrna Beach, you can see the bottom, that's an excerpt from the comprehensive plan. The key thing to note is basically the level of service standard for the state highway system, excluding the interstate, is D. So that means if the roadway is operating at level service D, that's acceptable. And then for county and local streets, the level service standard is E. So in terms of looking at these TIAs, you can imagine level service E, that doesn't sound very good, does it? So that's what, but that's the measure that we have. And quite honestly, these standards are pretty much consistent statewide because there's not enough money or property to widen all these roadways and maintain that level service A or B. So that's why you have a level service E or D. So you can imagine, okay, E's getting pretty ugly. We're not there yet, but we're getting ugly. So keep that in mind. And I think John talked about how your all's perspective on when something's not working is different than ours because of these definitions for us. So what happens when a roadway is deficient? We go and do a study and there's a deficient roadway or intersection. First of all, there's, right at the site access, a driveway, if they have turn lanes that are needed, then usually the development's 100% responsible for that. The more complex situation is when you have deficient roadways and intersections a little further away from the development. How do we handle that? Well, basically, Florida statute says, the mitigation requirements are a proportionate share. You got to have the developer pay its proportionate share. And what does that mean? Proportionate share means basically, let's say if a roadway breaks nearby the development. The city can't simply say, road's broken, guys, you gotta go fix it. No, what happens is the developer is only allowed, you're gonna require him to pay a certain percentage of that impact. And so here's an example. We had 100 single family homes as a development. Roughly that development's gonna consume about 5% of a 2-lane roadway, okay? The cost of the roadway, I'm just gonna throw out, is $8 million. So basically, the developer is responsible to pay for 5% of that $8 million, so $400,000. So that's their proportionate share in this example. So obviously, if there's $7.6 million, we're short. So you're kind of stuck holding the bag, but at the same time, you've got to allow development to move forward under this proportionate share approach. So it's very important to understand that. Okay, with $400,000 is their proportionate share. What do we do with that money now? Really, kind of some of the options, the main two options we typically deal with is, okay, can they simply take that $400,000 and build something, a smaller improvement somewhere else, a signalized intersection or turn lanes? It allows for the an improvement to be implemented faster, and so that's one way to do it. Is developer go ahead and take that $400,000 and do an improvement for us. Another option is the city to basically say, go ahead and please, the city will say, give us a check for $400,000, and perhaps the city can try and get other contributions from other development to try and build a bigger kitty for money and trying to get a bigger improvement to be done. They could even try and take that money and leverage the state and federal funds to get a larger improvement. The challenge, of course, of that is time frame. Who knows how many other developments will come in? Who knows what they're going to contribute? Who knows if you'll get federal or state funds? So, you're kind of a big question mark out there. So, you have those two options to kind of look at. And another component, John talked about impact fees. Well, 100 single-family homes, the fee right now is about $2,500 a home. So the overall, this development for 100 homes would pay $250,000. This developer, in this case, to kind of make it a clean example, would say, hey, we're already paying $250,000. How about we'll do a $400,000 improvement, just call it a day. We don't owe impact fees. And that's called impact fee credits. So we've got this balancing act to kind of to juggle around to figure out how do we get something for the developer to mitigate their impacts and also consider impact fees as well. So that gives you an idea of the standards and criteria we have to deal with. State statute is what dictates the proportionate share requirements. So our hands are somewhat tied under that. And then I mentioned the level service E. So again, level service E versus level service F. Again, you all are thinking maybe a roadway's broken, but based on the actual true measurements, based on our technical tools, it may not be broken in our terms. Now, there's a lot of developments, as you all know, that have been going through the development approval process, and I'm not going to get into all the details. This is a map from the city, but over on the west side of the city, you got 2,100 homes that are coming through, supporting commercial. If you look at the current counts, the roadways today are at 40 to 80% of capacity, depending on the roadway. So there's a decent amount of available capacity out there in terms of how much development we could potentially approve. Now, there's been a lot of improvements that have been occurred. You all have seen signals at Airport and 44, Pioneer and 44, the Ocean Gate 44 intersection. There's even some more recent commitments, 44 in Glencoe recently with the apartment complex being approved. There's going to be a turn lane and signal improvements, pedestrian improvements at 44 in Glencoe. And then John mentioned the Williamson extension. There's another development that's working with the city to try and get some right-of-way donated or dedicated for that project as well. So there's a lot of different things that are happening. But going back to John's Southeast Volusia opportunities, when you take our development review process and the limited funds we can get, we also need to take into account the vision down the road. What are some of the major improvements that we have to deal with and think about? And so one of the challenges we have is thinking about our limited opportunities to get money, but how do we try and take that and try and make things happen, whether it's the Williamson Boulevard extension, the Pioneer Trail interchange is going to make a big impact as well. And so this is one of the challenges we have. I'm not going to get into the details of all the developments, but hopefully this gives you a feel, again, for what we're restricted by, the rules we have to play by, but also we're keeping in mind the future of our roadway network as well, so we can make this community better at the end of the day as well. So with that being said, I appreciate it. I'm going to pass it on to Mike Sanders from DOT.
Good evening. My name is Mike Sanders. I am a traffic engineer with the Florida Department of Transportation. I work in District 5, which is located in DeLand, the District 5 headquarters. I am a resident of West Volusia. Our family very much enjoys visiting New Smyrna Beach on weekends, so don't hold that against me. So what we do in traffic operations where I work in the district, we address safety and operational concerns and develop solutions to make traffic move more safely and efficiently. So the transportation environment is changing, and we are looking more to increased opportunities with information and technology to assist with meeting our transportation needs. So I'm going to be discussing some existing and emerging technology that is being deployed in our district. So some information about FDOT District 5. District 5 is one of the fastest growing areas in the state. It covers 9 counties, including Volusia, and is home to over 4.1 million residents. And just to put that number in perspective, the population of our district is equal to the 27th most populated state in the country. And our state is on pace this year to surpass a record 118 million tourists estimated for 2017, with many of those tourists visiting the Central Florida area. So this just underscores the need for the state to have information and technology solutions more than ever. So one of our more notable transportation projects is the opening of our new Regional Traffic Management Center next spring. It's a 44,000 square foot state-of-the-art facility for freeway operations, signal operations, and the Florida Highway Patrol dispatch. The RTMC will monitor traffic conditions around our 9-county area, coordinating the response to incidents, controlling traffic signals, and informing the public via dynamic message signs, 511, social media, and news media. This is an aerial view of what the RTMC will look like. RTMC staff will monitor traffic utilizing cameras along the roadway, as you've seen on the news, and use other detection technology to assist with identifying incidents, coordinating with emergency services to get the right equipment on scene faster to quickly clear crashes from the roadway, minimizing delays. Another function worth noting is addressing the special transportation needs brought on by hurricane season. whether a tropical storm is due to strike Florida or a much larger hurricane, the FDOT is responsible for seeing that preparations are made and procedures carried out and keeping roads open for the thousands of coastal residents who may have to evacuate their community. The RTMC will assist with meeting this goal. This is a construction view of the facility. It's located on Wilson Road in Seminole County, approximately 3 miles south of Volusia County. I mentioned 511, which is the state's free and official service to provide incident, congestion, and construction information on all of our Florida's interstates, toll roads, and other metro roadways. 511 uses real-time information collected by intelligent transportation systems. Travelers now have access to more benefits and features to deliver real-time traffic and travel information. You can use the system to set up personalized services to receive text and email alerts for your specific route whenever travel time increases, traffic speed changes, there's crashes, construction, and congestion. And these alerts can be sent at the times and days you choose. So dynamic message signs are controlled by our traffic management center, and they're large electronic signs on the highway that can change the message they display. Newer signs are full color matrix. The department is installing new electronic message signs to assist motorists traveling through the Daytona Beach area to attend the Daytona 500 and other large events. The improvements will be positioned along Bevel Road, US 92, LPGA, State Road 40, and US 1. And to assist guests going to our beaches, the county is partnering with FDOT to add dynamic message signs along major beach routes to inform our guests on beach conditions or advise them to seek alternate beach parking. So John touched on adaptive signal control. District 5 in partnership with cities and counties are responsible for operating and maintaining over 1,600 traffic signals on the state highway system. So this is not including those on local roads. So many of these traffic signals are located on roadways where their spacing allows for signal coordination. The signals are programmed to operate on a predetermined timing plan to maximize efficiency and reduce the number of required stops. So there's different coordination plans are developed for peak hours and special events. However, when an incident occurs that differs from our developed coordination plans, the signal timing can lose its effectiveness. Adaptive signals continuously adjust traffic signal timings to accommodate real-time changes in traffic patterns to improve traffic flow. Adaptive signal control is best suited for arterials that experience highly variable or unpredictable traffic demand. So a good case and a good use for adaptive signals would be on east-west coastal routes where a thunderstorm may suddenly discharge a lot of number of vehicles onto the roadway network. So an adaptive signal would be able to adjust the timing plan to accommodate more efficient traffic flow. So there are 2 existing adaptive signal systems in Volusia County, on US 92 in Daytona and on 1792 in Deland. Other proposed locations include State Road 44 from Airport Road to 3rd Avenue, and also along State Road 40 in Ormond and 421 in Port Orange. So moving on to other advanced transportation technology, connected vehicle technology uses wireless communications and computer processing and advanced vehicle sensors and GPS navigation and infrastructure to provide information. There is vehicle-to-vehicle information exchange called V2V, vehicle infrastructure, V2I, and vehicle-to-handheld devices, V2D. So connected vehicles provides the capability to identify threats and hazards on the roadway and communicate this information to give drivers alerts and warnings within vehicles or handheld devices. Some examples shown here are connected vehicles alerting of conflicting vehicle maneuvers, alerting motorists of a curve and if the vehicle speed is too high for conditions, and alerting the driver if a pedestrian is in a crosswalk. Connected vehicles differ from autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles can operate without assistance from the infrastructure and is largely led by the automotive industry. Autonomous vehicles could mean greater mobility for senior citizens, the disabled, and persons in communities underserved by public transit, as well as provide environmental and health benefits such as lower fuel emissions and fewer crash fatalities. So there are currently 6 levels of automation. Level 0 is no automation. This is driving as it exists today in most cars. Level 1 is driver assistance. Most new cars on the market have features that classify as level 1. Level 2 is partial automation, such as parallel parking features, and control is ultimately with the driver. Level 3, the cars can safely control all aspects of driving in a mapped environment, but humans are still required to be present, monitoring and managing changes in road environments or unforeseen scenarios. At level 4, cars have reached self-driving automation. No driver interaction is needed, and the car will stop itself if the system fails, which is an important distinction from level 3. And there are no level 4 production vehicles available to consumers. Level 5 is fully autonomous. Steering wheel is optional. So besides controlling the destination, humans will have no other involvement in driving the car, which sounds exciting and terrifying all at the same time. Another part of connected vehicle technology is parking availability systems. And parking management all along our coast has historically been a challenge. There can be technology to show where parking is available and could reduce congestion, delay, and emissions by eliminating the motor's need to drive around to find available parking spots. The state has a similar initiative with our truck parking availability system that aims for truck parking safety. TPAS uses in-ground sensors for truck spaces at interstates or interstate rest areas, welcome centers, and some way stations to monitor the number of available truck parking spaces. There are 7 existing locations in District 5 on I-4 and I-95, with 5 additional locations to be added by 2019. Drivers are notified by signing in advance of the parking areas, and the information will also be displayed on the state's 511 website and phone app for drivers to access. Another connected vehicle technology is smart transit kiosks. These are interactive, user-friendly kiosks deployed at transit stop locations. They provide users real-time transit locations for the buses, route information, and access to mobility on demand without a smartphone. They can provide transit agencies awaiting passenger verification. So the Central Florida region recently received an $11.9 million grant from the Federal Highway Administration to advance several transportation technology initiatives aimed at improving safety and easing congestion. The FDOT applied for the grant in collaboration with Metro Plan Orlando and UCF. The funds came from the FHWA Advanced Transportation and Congestion Management Technologies Deployment Grant Program, which funds cutting-edge technologies that are ready to be deployed to enhance existing traffic capacity. Combining the $11.9 million grant with local investments, 3 interrelated programs were developed that connect through an ongoing FDOT initiative called SunStore. Those 3 programs are PedSafe, Greenway, and Smart Community. So PedSafe is an innovative pedestrian and bicycle collision avoidance system using connected vehicle technologies at high-risk locations, currently being designed by a DOT. PedSafe will connect vehicles, people, and traffic lanes. Drivers of vehicles will be alerted when there is a pedestrian or cyclist in the area. Traffic signals will be aware of pedestrians crossing the road and ensure they have enough time to cross. This system will be tested at the UCF main campus and in Pine Hills in Orlando, where a community that has faced significant challenges with pedestrian safety. The Greenway program is designed to better utilize the multimodal transportation system by actively managing over 1,000 traffic signals within the region. This will make travel times more consistent and help reduce congestion within the Metro Plan Orlando network and beyond, with the ability to expand to a district-wide solution. Smart Community is an integrated program that will utilize the UCF main campus as a test bed for transportation technology deployment. UCF has the largest student body population in the U.S. with over 66,000 enrollees. The campus brings a variety of transportation modes within one area with similar characteristics to the city, allowing for scalability within the region to further the program. Included technology, some of which we discussed here, includes transit mobility kiosks, connected vehicle technology, including PedSafe, queue and curb warnings, automated vehicle shuttles, routes to connect students, faculty, and staff to central campus locations, smart parking availability system, rideshare availability, and transit signal priority for better bus route reliability. This project is in 90% design phase, with some of the components scheduled for construction next year. So having a wide range of technology out on the roads means there will be an endless stream of data to manage. SunStore will connect and integrate many data sources so FDOT can make the information available to universities, research institutions, and businesses to encourage innovation. So I've only covered a small portion of the emerging technology that our district is taking the lead on statewide. We have a dedicated website, cflsmartroads.com, that has more details on all of our technology initiatives and how the technology specifically works. With that, I will turn the podium over to Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mike. I'm Stephen Harris with the River to Sea TPO. I'm a transportation planner and project manager. And I'll tell you about future trail development in New Smyrna Beach. Outdoor recreation and trails are economic drivers here in the state of Florida. Over $58 billion in annual spending from outdoor recreation. About 500,000 direct jobs, $3.5 billion in state and local taxes, almost $18 billion in wages can be attributed to outdoor recreation. When it comes to trails, there are more than 1,600 miles of trails in Florida. And for every $1 million spent on trails, it yields 9.6 jobs. According to the National Association of Home Builders, trails add value to new homes and are consistently among the top 4 community amenities sought by prospective homeowners of all ages. Trails enable users to walk, bike, view wildlife, engage in equestrian activities. Trails boost fitness and well-being, a connection with the outdoors, and economic growth. So, what is a multi-use trail? What is a sidewalk? And what's the difference? Well, a multi-use trail is paved, shared use path. Surface can be typically asphalt or concrete. Typically 12 feet wide, but it can vary from 10 to 14 feet wide, depending on physical or environmental constraints or usage. Multi-use trails are designed to facilitate mixed-use travel, and priority at intersections may be given to trail users. Now, there are different types of trails. There are hiking trails, there are paddling trails and waterways, there are equestrian trails, but the trails that we'll be focusing on tonight are multi-use trails for people that are either on foot, on bicycle, riding wheelchairs, pushing strollers, skateboards, etc. Non-motorized transportation. Sidewalks, in contrast, they serve a local need, and a sidewalk is routinely built as part of a normal bicycle and pedestrian accommodations within a roadway project. Sidewalks are designed for pedestrian use with priority at intersections normally given to roadway traffic. Since they're designed for pedestrians, sidewalks are normally narrower, typically 5 or 6 feet wide. And they can accommodate travel in one direction. If you're just dealing with pedestrians on foot, two-way travel. But obviously, if you have people on bicycles or some other type of non-motorized vehicle, it's going to be tight. And if there's two-way traffic and they have to pass, typically someone will have to get off the sidewalk. Now, the River to Sea Transportation Planning Organization, our role is to coordinate transportation planning and foster cooperation and communication among members. And New Smyrna Beach is a member. The TPO is responsible for prioritizing the expenditure of state and federal funding. Our products include a long-range transportation plan, transportation improvement plan, or TIP, typically over a 5-year work program period, and the annual development of project priority list. TPO sets aside 30% of annual federal funds for bicycle and pedestrian projects, just under $2 million a year. And in addition to that, sets aside another $100,000 a year for bicycle and pedestrian feasibility studies. Now, one of these studies, it's not a feasibility study, it's a larger planning study that we sponsored several years ago, was the Regional Trails Corridor Assessment. The TPO undertook this study to complete the regional trails network in this planning area, which, by the way, is all of Volusia County and most of Flagler County east of US 1. The assessment was also undertaken to develop and finalize trail alignments and connections, to inventory the trail gaps, and determine the feasibility of trail alignments. We developed concept plans, and we also developed cost estimates for filling in those trail gaps. Now, what you see here is a product of the Regional Trails Corridor Assessment. And this shows you the regional trails throughout the area. The largest of which is the St. Johns River to Sea Loop Trail, and that's a 5-county loop, almost 300 miles long, goes through Volusia, Brevard, Putnam, Flagler, and St. Johns counties. Part of it will go right through New Smyrna Beach, and so that regional trail, as well as the East Coast Greenway, will go through New Smyrna Beach. And actually, the East Coast Greenway is more of a national trail, because when built out, it will start in Key West, go north all the way to Maine. In 2016, the St. Johns River Sea Loop Trail, in yellow on this map, it was designated by the Florida Greenways and Trails Council as the #1 regional trail system in Florida. Another important trail to note on this map is the Coast to Coast Trail. It's in red. That actually starts in Pinellas County on the Gulf side of the state. And it's under construction now. When complete, it will go to Titusville. It will link the Gulf of Mexico to the Atlantic Ocean. It will be 250 miles wide. And it doesn't go through Smyrna Beach, but it goes through Volusia County. Now, the Shared Use Non-Motorized Sun Trail Network was created by the Florida legislature in 2015 to fund a statewide system of paved multi-use trails. It's the paved component of the Florida Greenways and Trails System Priority Land Trail Network. Some of the other types of trails I mentioned earlier, like paddling trails and hiking trails, they're also part of the Florida Greenways and Trails system. But the Sun Trail Network, which is a subset of that, is just paved multi-use trails, separated from roadway traffic. Now this is a vision for trail development here in New Smyrna Beach. Now I know this is a busy slide. Several projects on here are not trails projects, but some of them are. And TPO has partnered with the city and the Florida Department of Transportation to help fund and develop these trails. One of the trails that's open now, New Smyrna Beach is a multi-use trail from the county fire station, Sugar Mill Drive. That was a project that was a partnership between the city, TPO, Florida Department of Transportation. It was a project that TPO used the set-aside funding, 90% federal funds were used. The city contributed 10% federal and local funds. And that project is enjoyed by numerous residents and visitors alike. Other projects on here include the Turnbull Bay Road Trail. There's a trail along Myrtle Avenue that will tie into the Sun Trail Network and several others. These are the trails from this trails vision that are also on the TPO's priority list that the TPO is working with the city and again, the Florida Department of Transportation to build. And so when these trails are built, the locations they're built in will be where you see the future trail development. Now, the Sun Trail Network, as I mentioned, also goes through the city. Whereas some of the trails I just mentioned are on the west side of the city and represents the local trail network that will be built out on the west side of the city. The two regional trails I mentioned, Sun Trail, East Coast Greenway, are on the east side of the city. They go along the north-south corridor. And the Florida Department of Transportation is currently looking at alignments to build these Sun Trail funded trails. These are some of the trail alignments that the Florida Department of Transportation has come up with. In this case, this is between State Road 44, Lytle Avenue, and Turnbull Bay Road. Now keep in mind, these trails, this trail alignment that you see here in green is subject to change. It has not been finalized, but it will give you an idea of the general location of the trail when it is built. Here's the corridor as it continues from Turnbull Bay Road to US 1 in green and in red. And this is the Sun Trail corridor along US 1. That's my contact information. And thank you for your time.
Okay, lots of questions, which is great, but that's also a lot to absorb. So let's go ahead and take 5 minutes. We're going to do a little reshuffling. We're going to move these guys up so you can see them a little better. We're going to go ahead and do a quick mic test on our second microphone. So take 5, take in the fresh air, restroom break, and we'll be back on in a few.
Why do they run on Magnolia Street? Oh, really? Fundraisers. Why aren't they on the trails?
Check. Microphone check.
So I'm not staying down as long as Cliff. I have a grandson coming on November 5th. Yes, I remember that. This is so exciting for you. Oh, started to swell. She started to
I have to see that later. Really? Isn't it? Oh my God.
So I'm scheduled to watch the dog while Warren and Chris are at the hospital.
You're not invited for the fur.
Well, I invited once where she started, they did not do.
Yeah. Are they inducing laser?
She's not allowed to go any deeper because of her traditional beliefs. She had that conversation so they have to take the baby.
Well, I was an early baby. No.
I think it's 2 weeks.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, but still, you're concerned.
She's in pain. Of course, that's where her surgery was originally. That caused those complications. Well, she had a septum inside of her uterus. Part of it is
I remember the wedding. It can't even be bigger than that. Oh my God.
It's not as big as the other.
Hey, I gotta get some more water.
Let me get you one.
No, I need to move actually.
Oh, okay.
I'll be right back.
So I asked my parking question in spite of all this.
It's a
I am going to say, can't you promote fundraisers on that? Use the trails. I mean, I'm going to say, can't they promote the 5Ks and everything to use the trails rather than the streets?
No.
Well, the license
And then when I backed out of the driveway, I mean, they had stopped somebody.
yeah, and then what yeah, the cops can put up the sign, you know, like they have to they do that now. They need
The lowest second person, she's going to be doing it. I don't know the name.
Oh, okay. No, I think it's done. Okay, yeah. So I know when they were doing all this stuff, it was, yeah. Oh my God. Wow, I'm impressed. I'm still trying to remember where things are. I go around the house and I say, oh, look at that. I forgot you bought a new cedar chest. I assume.
Everything else. Senior citizens, people with
Right, we haven't seen them. No. I'll take that. Couch. So go ahead and press and hold the left.
I was trying to get, I walked down to Canal today. I walked down to try to get my.
Okay, everybody, you want to go ahead and start making your way back to your seats? We'll begin the question and answer panel here once we're all seated.
I finally just walked back down. I didn't think, I watched the traffic going past and I said, oh my God, what is it, 16? I don't know.
Okay, everybody, we'll go ahead and start the question and answer panel here. Wow, I've got a fist full of comment cards here, which is good. That's exactly what I wanted to see here. In the event that we're not able to get to all of them, we're going to go ahead and still make sure that they get these, that we get answers on them, and then we post them to the CCR section of the city's website so you can see them. And rest assured, they'll also go ahead and make it into our data review that's going to go towards the city commission recommendations. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and begin the panel. Okay, first one, and this looks like, we'll just have them pass the microphone back and forth to each other. First one kind of looks like a Mike Sanders question, so let's bring it on down. It reads, how can we get FDOT to add slower traffic, keep right, and keep right except to pass on the variable message boards to hopefully improve traffic flow?
Slower traffic, keep right on arterials is difficult to implement because a lot of people pre-position in the left lane in advance for making a left turn movement. So it's not reasonable to keep people, always in the outside lane. There's a reason for people that have a need to be in the left turn lane. Now, on interstates and limited access roadways, absolutely. We do put that message up on variable message signs. We have that message on static signs in the median to keep slower drivers out of the passing lane.
Okay, second one kind of reads like a Mike Sanders question as well. It leads off with autonomous vehicles here. It reads, autonomous vehicles sound great, but if people don't have to worry about commute time, won't that only increase the tendency towards low-density urban sprawl? So people don't have to worry about living close to that urban center. It sounds like, is that only going to encourage people to move further and further away from that urban center?
Wow, that's a really good planning level question. I can understand the logic of that question, and I can see that. Certainly, if you have the ease of an autonomous shuttle, where you can do other things during your commute than drive, I can see people using that time and living further and further away from where they actually work. So, in some ways, that could contribute to some urban sprawl.
Okay. All right, good. Two great questions right off the bat. But look at this sack right here. All right, next question. What are NSV's plans on handling golf carts, resident carts, rental carts? For the purposes of law enforcement, by the way, they're referred to as low-speed vehicles. Since they appear to act differently, have you guys seen kind of trends, countywide as far as golf carts go? And what do you think about that here in New Smyrna?
Again, it's your community. We've seen golf carts being approved in various cities throughout Volusia County, Lake Helen, South Daytona. Within the county itself, we do have an ordinance and policies with regards to where we allow golf carts, which are typically self-contained neighborhoods. But we do allow them to cross county roads, county thoroughfares, and we work hand in hand with the local city to say, where do you want it? As regards to low-speed vehicles, unfortunately, we've had experience with that also. Mainly in the Ormond Beach area, where we reduced the speed of a road from 40 to 35, and we got a lot of slow-speed vehicles, and then we got golf carts thinking they're slow-speed vehicles with the triangle saying, I'm a slow-speed vehicle. What we had to do was work with the DOT to say, how should we resolve this? And what we found was, on the interstate, you used to see those truck speed limit signs saying minimum speed. We ended up doing that on John Anderson Drive, looking at minimum speeds for low-speed vehicles at 20 miles per hour. Their top speed's 25, the golf cart's top speed is 20. We figured if it's a legal golf cart, and we had to educate the sheriff's office on what is a legal versus non-legal golf cart versus low-speed vehicle. The big difference is low-speed vehicles, you have to have insurance and be registered. A golf cart, you don't. So there's a cost differential already there. As it relates to New Smyrna Beach, I get a lot of calls about the excessive speeding on South Atlantic Avenue and people wanting us to reduce that speed limit. And then I get another bunch of calls from people and residents, your neighbors, who basically say, don't you dare do that, because I don't want those slow-speed vehicles. And we've understand that there may be an issue with slow-speed vehicles now on Saxon Drive. So we are doing a study to see, okay, what is the posted speed limit? Because another big difference is a golf cart, you have to approve the usage of golf carts on streets. Low-speed vehicles, they're allowed by law unless you prohibit them for, I believe, any road that's posted 35 miles per hour or lower.
Thank you. Okay, next question is, why is there no discussion of public transportation in a regional sense? So during the break, I was talking to Arlene, and she was telling me about the circuit she follows to get from here in New Smyrna Beach, from her doorstep to Orlando International Airport. And she says in order to take the network of Lynx buses and Votran and Sunrail and everything in between to get to OIA, it takes approximately 6 hours, which is just 1 hour less than it takes to fly across the Atlantic, right? So what, I guess, what are there any big plans for bringing high-speed regional transportation here to New Smyrna Beach that can get us to those international travel hubs?
I was at a meeting last Friday, the Central Florida Metropolitan Planning Organization Alliance. One of the presentations was a regional transit study, but the results basically said it's not sustainable at the current time because there's just not enough travel demand to do that. So what they're looking at is the existing routes, looking at bus rapid transit. As you may or may not know, the county recently did, in the last 2 to 3 years, a transit study connecting the West Volusia to East Volusia. It came back saying that bus rapid transit was probably better than extending Sunrail. We're just trying to get Sunrail up to the land right now. So there's no money, or I think it was kind of questionable about the usage between East and West Volusia. I am glad to hear that you will be getting a Votran fixed route on State Road 44, so that should be coming soon along. I think we also have gold service. So the answer to your question is there's nothing available.
And that's my question. And a simple thing, since Sunrail's already there, and I think you said that there was another question as well, why can't they have it 7 days a week? The stupid train's already there.
So that was another question. We'll go ahead and just skip to that one then. Are there any plans for weekend service for Sunrail?
It's been looked at on various occasions. Right now, it's only sponsored by major events. Again, it was commuter rail was the envisioning of Sunrail. It's not for our generation. It's not for my sons and daughters. It's that future generations, the generations as a transit-oriented development starts building around the hubs and stuff like that. So we will have to, again, plan for the future hubs so that they are sustainable. Right now, I know there is express bus from Daytona to DeLand area, and then from DeLand to the Sunrail station in DeLand, there's service. I think, and again, I'm not the expert, I believe New Smyrna Beach is somewhat isolated with bus service from your hub downtown up to South Daytona, Port Orange, and areas north. And again, everything's demand driven. And again, I want to appreciate everyone because you're paying as city residents with your ad valorem taxes to the county's general fund to support Votran. So thank you very much.
Okay, next question. How do you determine the new technology in traffic lights? So I guess put another way, maybe, there must be different ideas for traffic lights, LED versus standard bulbs, adaptive, intelligent, like what is the selection process there for which, technology ultimately wins out?
Well, who has the better mousetrap? We get solicitation by vendors all the time about new equipment and stuff like that. First thing we tell them is, that sounds great. You talk to the DOT, and the DOT will say, we don't mind you submitting anything to us as long as we put it through our extensive, very hard environmental testing, so that once it's approved through all these hardened instances with temperature, high, low, humidity, high, low, underwater, it gets approved and then goes on the approved product list. Everything that we install as the county, federal, state, city, county roads, has to be on that approved product list that's approved by the DOT.
Okay, let's mix it up a little bit. We've got some local questions here, kind of working from big to small. So, as a matter of fact, I see one here related to Magnolia Street, and we've been holding some public meetings on that, and we've been doing some studies on Magnolia Street. So, I'll go ahead. Colin Race down here is our assistant city manager. He's been directly involved in that. I'll give him an opportunity to come up while I'll read the question here. So the question reads, who is in charge of control of speeding on Magnolia Street? As a resident, I wish they could close off the south end of Magnolia Street at US 1.
Good evening. I'm Khalid Reshadat. I'm the assistant city manager. The city controls the speed of Magnolia. However, Magnolia connects to US 1 down by the city limits. We have had meetings with DOT and the city of Edgewater. One of the ideas that came up from the study that Chris and his company did, they did a traffic calming study on Magnolia, and one of the suggestions was to close off Magnolia to US 1. But because it connects down in Edgewater, we have to get their approval on it. So their city commission meeting is, I think it's mid-November. So they will take it to their council, and then also DOT they're looking at to discuss it with their other staff members. If that doesn't work, then we have a plan B to implement. So we have several traffic calming options to choose from. And so whatever happens, we will be ready for either option A or option B. I hope I answered your question. Did I?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do a trail question. Stephen, are there parking lot access points to the multi-use trail here at New Smyrna Beach?
In certain locations. For instance, Walmart, and during my presentation, I didn't really touch on the private development side of it, but the city works with private developers to build trails as well. And one of those trails is Walmart. When they built the super center, they built a loop trail within their parking lot. Obviously, that's close to parking. Private parking, but it's close to parking. Also, the trail that's open now, New Smyrna Beach Multi-Use Trail, from the County Fire Station to Sugar Mill Drive. On the Sugar Mill Drive side, there's a small parking lot. So, you know, ideally, every trail will have a trailhead with parking facilities. That's not always the case. But in urban areas like this one, you can usually find a park that's within a few blocks. Okay, it's just that when you get out to the rural areas, and some of the trails being built now are in very rural areas, that's when you have a tough time finding parking.
Okay, and while we've got the mic here, let's go ahead and keep it on trails. This question reads, could fundraising runs, like 5Ks, fun runs, things like this, use trails instead of having to shut down streets here and kind of impede traffic? Are the trails, like, is that a part of the planning process that, hey, we could host, you know, large recreational events on these trails?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think users would be better off running on a trail than running on the roadway for obvious reasons. You don't have the conflict with traffic. That's what trails are for. They're for runners, they're for walkers, they're for bikers, and so, absolutely.
So that's my question, and they're often on Magnolia Street. They run down Magnolia and back up Riverside Drive, and I bet it's beautiful, but it closes off the traffic to residents. And we have all these trails, and you'd like to promote them. I think you should redirect some of the fundraising towards the trails.
That's a good point. Now, some of the trails I had in the presentation go right through downtown New Smyrna Beach.
Yeah.
It's tough to find space to put a 12-foot wide trail and the horizontal clear space that it needs in a downtown area. So as a result, what's being proposed, instead of a trail the entire length through downtown, some of the locations are proposed to be what they call sharrows. And those are markings that would dictate that the roadway be shared by cars and by other users such as pedestrians and bikers. It can be done, but that's an example of compromise in a constrained area such as downtown.
Okay, one more trail question, and then we'll go ahead and change up topics. This reads, are the assisted, quote unquote, or motorized bicycles that are all the rage prevented from using the trail system? So, you know, do we ban certain types of vehicles from using the trail system, like motorized bicycles?
The answer is yes. On the county's regional trails, the answer is yes. We typically place no motorized vehicle signage on that, and even with some of the assisted pedicycles and stuff like that for the elderly, again, we prefer them not using the trails, because what happens if they get in the middle or a rural area and the battery dies? So I know one of the things we're looking at now is maybe putting mile markers or something like that on all of our trails, so if there is an incident, we know where to go to for the emergency services. But again, the basic answer is no, no motorized vehicles.
Right. And let me add to that. An exception would be a motorized wheelchair or a motorized scooter. Those users are actually pedestrians when they're using those devices, but they are very low speeds, and that's the key. They have smaller motors, very low speeds, and those are allowed.
Let's pass it down to Chris here, since he hasn't gotten a question yet. So this one reads, what is the difference between road capacity and road deficiency? And then a follow-up, why can't impact fees be used for road deficiencies?
Well, I mean, road capacity, simply put, is how much traffic the road can carry. So, example is on a peak hour, a roadway can carry, a two-lane roadway can carry, 1,800 cars in an hour. The deficiency is when you have a volume of 2,000 vehicles on that 1,800 capacity. So that road is now deficient because the volume is exceeding the capacity. And then in terms of the deficiency, that's an impact fee question. And I had the same question as well.
I had the same question. I think it's based on Florida statutes.
John, question. Are all traffic signals in Volusia County programmed by the county? And then a comment, if yes, they need to be much better coordinated.
Captain Obvious here. We do a combination of who's programming the lights. Again, we work with our partners, the DOT. They retime all of the state roads in the urban areas every 3 years. They do the rural isolated intersections every 5 years. The county looks to partner with the department on the county and local streets. And typically what we do is we'll set up signal timings. That gentleman over there in that corner in the blue shirt, not me. He'll drive the corridor, and he lives in New Smyrna Beach. He drives the corridor along with my signal systems engineer, and they'll fine tune it. But like I said, the way the current technology is, it's based on time of day. And again, we'll take one day out of 365. We'll say, okay, there's an AM peak, a PM peak, and a midday peak. And we'll say, this is what it should do and what the timing should be for the rest of the year. Now, rest of the year probably didn't include the snowbirds or the beach season. So we've developed special timings for the beach season where State Road 44, we're flushing everyone in the morning from about 9 to 1:30, and in the afternoon we're flushing everyone back out to the interstate. Now, as Michael mentioned, it doesn't account for that afternoon thunderstorm. And so that's why we're looking more and more towards traffic adaptive, where it's thinking, it's like a neural network. It's looking at all the traffic and all the cars and saying, this is the best opportunity I have to push the platoon through and to minimize the delay. And what we've seen on the traffic adaptive systems that we currently have in DeLand and in Daytona Beach is everyone comes to the signal and they pull out this little device. And with the traffic adaptive, it's not your normal leading left turn arrow, followed by your through, followed by the side street left turn, followed by the through. It will bounce back and forth, and so you have to be aware of your situation.
Okay. Next question. Well, I'll just say this one's kind of more of a comment than a question. So we're just going to plant a seed here with Stephen. It says, connect the River to Sea Trail to the spur to Canaveral National Seashore National Park entrance.
It's already being planned. But Stephen can answer that.
Okay. Next question. It is no, and then I've got some laid out here talking about local plans for local roads, widening, new intersections, things like this. So this question. It is known that several agencies, including the landowner, have not agreed yet on the location of Williamson Road between Pioneer Trail and State Road 44. What is being done to resolve this issue? What is the schedule for resolving this issue?
I know that's a county question. That's the million-dollar question. I know our new engineering and construction director, Tab, has been speaking with the Utilities Commission to see if we can resolve the impasse of the alignment. We did an alignment study probably 10 years ago, and then the Utilities Commission said, let's move it all the way to the west. Now we're trying to find a happy medium. I know we have worked with the developer that's directly south of Pioneer Trail and the city, and we appreciate the city staff and all their assistance to get an alignment of Williamson going through that private development, and now we're just working with the Utilities Commission. Time-wise, that's a good question. We need to settle on where potential alignment should be. Then we need to do an alignment study. Then we would need to have the city and the county elected officials approve the alignment, and then we can start design. If there's purchasing of right-of-way, or if the Utility Commission on their good graces will say, hey, we'll donate the land, you can go build it, so we'll open up our land. Depending on the right-of-way, and then we're looking at construction. When I talk to my elected officials and we're talking about state and federal dollars, that process is anywhere from 8 to 16 years. When I tell my elected officials, it's beyond your elected career. And that's just the reality of the world we work in right now. We're trying to expedite and try and reduce that cost. But again, the first thing is talking face to face with the Utilities Commission to say, where's that best alignment? And that's underway now.
Okay, we'll go ahead and hand it back to Chris here, because you talked about TIAs, traffic impact analysis. In reviewing several TIAs, now stay with me here because this is a pretty savvy varsity question. in reviewing several TIAs, the growth forecast of the beach-going traffic, i.e. the traffic, the background traffic, i.e. the traffic not generated by the development under consideration, used area-wide growth factors and did not take into account other new adjacent development traffic. Why is this the procedure used for the TIAs?
Actually, the procedure now is really one that we actually take all the developments that have been approved, and as another development comes in, and that may have been an older TIA. The ones nowadays, basically, as a development comes in, let's say we have 10 approved developments, we now have to basically be adding all those development trips up, so taking existing volumes, adding these 10 developments before development number 11 can go ahead and look at the roadways. Now that being said, I will say that approach is also a very highly conservative approach as well. When you're having a lot of developments coming in place, you're changing travel patterns. The example, you're putting, services now more convenient to Venetian Bay as an example, so they don't have to go through the interchange to a degree, maybe to go get, services. Port Orange went through a similar process where they did this highly conservative approach, and actually, I was working with the city of Port Orange, this is back in 08, 07, and they labeled, layered all these developments on top, and they were projecting volumes that were just ridiculously high. It seemed like a reasonable approach, but those volumes were shown to be 50 to 100% over capacity of the roadway, and those were projections for 2012, 2013. Those, look at the volumes today, they're still not even at capacity today. So, when you start layering all these developments on top, it sounds like it's the right approach, but at the end of the day, it's going to throw everybody into a panic, and all of a sudden, everybody's going to say the roads are broken. And there's some logic we have to use. There's also a study that John had mentioned, the corridor study that DOT did for 44, the refresh, and they worked with the city to understand all the developments that were approved, and they did modeling, a long-range model. And actually, they even showed that 44 was still working with all these developments. That 44 was still projected to be working or right close to capacity. So there's it's not a perfect science, but we've got to be thinking about what we're doing and not just say, let's add all these developments on top and it works. Or we can't, also we can't just go, well, use a regional growth rate and that's all we need. We got to, it's somewhere in the middle.
Two things. The key phrase Chris said is, it's approved by the city. Once it's approved by the city, then the local jurisdictions have the right to include those trips as what we call vested trips. If it's not approved, and again, whoever asked the question is very savvy to say, you may get 3 developments all at one time with the TIA, and none of the other 2 include those other trips. And technically, we can't ask them to do that unless it's approved. Now, when we look at growth rates and background growth, it's not on a regional model. Typically, they look at the historical counts on every road that's significant. And they do a trend to say, okay, is the growth rate horizontal, exponential, is it plus, minus? And then, my good buddy here, he says, if it's less than 2, the minimum growth rate is typically ballpark 2%. And again, we work with the different local jurisdictions and say, is 2% too high? If it's documented that it's a negative growth rate, and we have seen that, we sometimes allow a 1%. But we're working in collaboration with the state, the city, and the county to say, what is that appropriate growth rate?
Okay, got a couple of questions about speed limits. Speed limits. So the first one, and this one's kind of more geared towards the signs. We need 45-mile-an-hour signs westbound on State Road 44 east of Hidden Pines. None past Half Wall. Cars exiting New Smyrna Shopping Center do not see any 45-mile-an-hour signs going west. So what is the strategy there in terms of the intervals, the placement of signs?
Well, you'll have the speed limit signs placed wherever there's actual speed limit change, where the speed limit is increased or decreased, and then you would add confirmation speed limit signs every couple miles or just upstream and downstream of major intersections. So when people turn off the side street, they encounter the confirmation speed limit sign to know what the speed limit is. If there is an issue in the area of Hidden Pines on 44 that's not providing good motorist guidance, then that's something we could certainly look at to see if there's a need for any additional speed limit signs.
Okay, and second question, just a quick follow-up on speed limits. How can we get consistent speed limits? So I guess implied in that question then it perhaps is, hey, I feel like I'm speeding up, I'm slowing down. I'm speeding up, I'm slowing down.
It's more like you go, some places in New Smyrna Beach,
Yes.
a two-lane residential road
Mm-hmm.
will be 25 miles an hour. Other places it'll be 35 miles an hour.
Okay.
And so you're always sort of like, you know, if I cross the street, even though everything looks the same, and of course people go racing down my two-lane street, I'd love to have it dialed back to 25. So it's just this patchwork of speed limits throughout the city.
So then you'd prefer something more standardized where, hey, if it's a low-density residential neighborhood, 25 wherever you are. Is that kind
Well,
of?
a
Sure.
two-lane residential road,
Mhm.
I mean, because low density becomes subjective, but a two-lane residential road is objective. And so you have a speed limit, so you know if you're on two-lane residential, you know what your speed limit is.
Guys, what do we think?
I think it's a great idea. Just how do we get there?
That's what I'm asking.
And the reason I'm flippant about it is I've been doing this for 30 years, plus 30 years. And of all the things I can do as the county traffic engineer, the one thing I can't do is say, this is what the speed limit's going to be, because I think it should be, because it's just common sense. With the Florida state, of all the things that I'm governed by, speed limits say you have to do it by Florida statutes, by the rules promulgated by my good friend, the DOT, which basically means we have to do a study. And again, the way around your problem is I can do a spot speed study on a road, or if the city desires a community-wide set speed limit, you could do it at randomly selected points around the city or the neighborhood. And then you can use that as a representative sample of all the other roads in the neighborhood. And the way the speed limit is determined, which is the other key thing, is every one of you, it's your fault. It's your fault. It's your fault. Every one of you that drives is telling us engineers up here what the speed limit should be. Okay? So if someone's speeding, or if you're speeding, and we all know that the cop in the back, he allows a 5 mile per hour, well, actually the legislators—
Chief Mike Hoffman, ladies and gentlemen.
The legislators have allowed a 5 mile per hour grace speed. So if it's 30, you can go 35. Most of the traffic courts in Volusia County, most of the law enforcement officers, they don't do a ticket between 5 to 10 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. Am I wrong?
He won't
Chief?
say.
Anyway, I always drive 8 miles. No, anyway, so you all vote. We look at that 85th percentile, and then I can adjust that speed limit plus or minus 3 miles per hour from what you're telling me it should be. And the DOT, when I was in my previous life with them, they did a study on a road in another county, and basically they posted the speed at 45, 50, 55, 60, and I don't think they did 65 at the time. And I think they may have also done 40. And the 85th percentile was consistent no matter what they posted the speed. And what you'll find is, based on the characteristics of the road, is it narrow, 20 feet, 10 feet, 8 feet, of the lanes, the number of trees adjacent to it, is it curb and gutter, or does it have a nice 5-foot paved shoulder? That determines how fast you're going to drive. But there is the ability, again, If you want to do a citywide or a neighborhood-wide, there is that ability to do it. What I have to tell my residents is, be careful what you ask for. If you're asking for it to go, remember, all residential roads in Florida, whether they're posted or not posted, by default are 30 miles per hour. Okay? When we're talking to our developers, when they're doing new subdivisions, we say, if you want it 25, post it 25 now, because after you've opened it and you sold the lots, you have to do a study to justify, reducing it from 30 to 25 or from 25 up to 30. But again, the cautionary tale is, if it's higher than what you desire, I still have to look out for what everyone else is telling me how fast that road should be. And I may have to do a supplemental study to get it back to the posted speed limit and justify why back in the day, when we were paving dirt roads, our dirt roads were posted 25 because, again, it's a washboard. We'd throw some asphalt down, have the trees, boom, right smack next to the road. And we were going out there after it was paved, and probably 2 to 3 months afterwards. And I remember one road in particular, the average 85th percentile speed was 60 miles per hour. So we went from 25 to 60, and we posted it at 40, justifying the trees, the utility poles, and everything like that. So, a cautionary tale.
So it's a little nerdy, but in things like transportation planning and urban design and planning, there are things that become trendy, perhaps. What's hot today could be yesterday's news, but something you hear a lot about now are complete streets, right? Road diets. This notion that if we take a 40-foot wide road and kind of narrow it down with landscaping and such, it'll naturally drive people to go slower, be safer, while at the same time having the silver lining of beautifying the neighborhood. So I have a specific question about this for here in New Smyrna Beach, and it reads, what can be done other than to blame the county to beautify and make safer South Atlantic? And that's our beachfront street here. It looks like a freeway rather than a resort design, too wide, needs landscaping, more walking, bicycling, this is controversial, golf cart friendly. So what do you think? Are there streets that you pick, like South Atlantic, and say, maybe this might be a good candidate for a road dive?
Typically, when we're looking at road diets, whether it's the county or the state, we're looking at 4-lane undivided highways and looking to reduce it, do a lane reduction to 2-way with a left turn lane in the middle. And we may use concrete islands so that it's not a suicide lane, the whole lane, just a short section of the lane. We're all for complete streets. As engineers, we like to repackage things and sell them because it sounds better. We've been doing complete streets, like I said, for over 30 years. Complete street is typically the street, the sidewalk, bicycle paths, stuff like that. Where we get into the new terminology and how we've repackaged it is landscaping. And the county is okay if the cities want to landscape the roads, just like the state's okay if you want to landscape State Road 44. The county is leery of landscaping because we've been sued so many times for the trees that have fallen and have created a crash, and now we're paying out the nose. So we don't mind if you want to put a bunch of palm trees or crepe myrtles, go at it, please. That looks great. I will say this, is if you're driving around anywhere in Florida or even in Volusia County, you know the quality of life of the city by looking at the street, the landscaping, and everything else. And trust me, you don't want the county maintaining it, because again, remember I mentioned all those pennies we get and that it's not indexed. Based on our current level of service, we mow our roads, our major roads, about 6 times a year. Now, thinking of the summer when you mow your yard every weekend, that may not be the quality of life that you all want to project to your guests.
From the department's perspective, complete street strategy is something that is being vetted by the state and encouraged. It's probably one of the best opportunities we have to effectively change the character of a roadway, make it more pedestrian friendly, slow vehicle speeds, easier to accommodate pedestrian crossings. Our planning group has a very large study for A1A that goes from Brevard County, Volusia County, Flagler County, looking for complete streets measures and taking some of those wider, faster, typical sections and narrowing the lanes, adding landscaping to slow speeds and improve pedestrian safely greatly. One thing that we do look at, we look at the capacity of the roadway to make sure that if we do take lanes away, that it's not going to create an issue with traffic congestion or taking those trips onto less desirable side roads.
Or alternative evacuation routes.
He said, or alternative evacuation routes for those who couldn't hear. All right, so 5-minute warning, right? As advertised, our CCRs are scheduled from 6 to 8 o'clock, so we'll get a few more questions in here. Okay, this one I'll go ahead and give to Steve, another trails question. In the Mid-Atlantic area, bike and walk trails are created using packed and crushed stone. Could we build our trail network faster if we use that method? So instead of paying for the pavement and all this, can we accelerate by using a less expensive method?
You could, but it would not give you the same ride quality, okay? And it's from a funding standpoint. We could not use federal funds for a trail that's built out of stabilized earth, or that's not asphalt or concrete. A lot of equestrian trails are unpaved, and they're good for hiking, they're good for horses, not so good for biking. And so from a funding standpoint, we would require those to be built with asphalt or concrete.
Okay, next question. And so this is kind of the great debate here now. Another trendy item is roundabouts, right? So are there any traffic intersections here in New Smyrna Beach that are planned on being changed from lights to roundabouts? Touched a nerve there.
With that response, but of course! I don't know of any. I know we purposely looked at part of this, at that alternative intersection study that we worked in partnership with the DOT for, to me, the perfect roundabout that would serve several purposes. Was at Business 44 and State Road 44 and where the fire station was. I know the city has been asking for fire preemption at that fire station so they can access State Road 44, and the state, sorry Mike, says it's too close to the light emission walls. So we thought that was a perfect roundabout location because you have that heavy right or left turn going on to Business 44 or Canal Street. What we heard from the residents was basically the same response you gave me, boo. So last I heard, it was not being one of the alternatives considered.
Okay, next question touches on heavy freight in delivery trucks. Are there any regulations governing the length and weight of delivery trucks? Can our existing roads handle the weight of these trucks, which seem to only get longer and heavier?
That's really a legislative issue. I know the county opposed to the latest rounds of expanding the weight limits of the trucks and the dual trucks, so they'd be triple trucks. Those are allowed, I believe, on the turnpike. We monitor the situation. Where we have complaints about trucks, we typically partner with the Motor Carrier Compliance, an arm of the Florida DOT, to do selective enforcement of trucks. Typically, we hear about the brakes and stuff like that and the noise. So that's very difficult. Like I said, it's more of a legislative issue, and we continue to monitor that at the county level. I do know any hauler can get a permit from any of the local jurisdictions if it's over the capacity, and again, it's evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, I'll just make a couple quick comments, right, so we can get as many of these through as possible here. So just 2 comments. Parking areas free to Volusia County residents are now charging only $10 daily parking fees to non-residents. That fee needs to be increased. And second comment, instead of planning to encourage cars, emphasize more healthful lifestyle choices, walking, biking, jogging, etc. Okay, next question. How about a left turn signal past at a New Smyrna / shopping center? There is one westbound. Picture on Mike's presentation. Mike? So sorry, I got a little jumbled there. So how about a left turn signal heading east?
No, left off of 44, turning into Winn-Dixie, where you take your life in your hand because there's a curve there. But if you're coming westbound, you've got one going into public shopping center.
Okay, that's much more clear than I could have told you.
So you're asking for a left turn phase. You'd like to be able to make a left turn with a green
Without
arrow.
taking your life in your hand.
Is that at Eddie?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot that name. Yes.
I think that's something we could certainly look at. That's something our office looks at throughout the district. Locations where left turn demand is increasing, the opposing traffic is increasing. It gets more difficult to find gaps to be able to safely make a left turn. And so we have a methodology we'll look at, and we can take a look at Eddy Road, certainly.
Okay, we'll just go ahead and hit our last question here, and this was a good Chris question. Is proportionate share a one-time payment? Who pays when roads need repairs at a later date?
Yes, I mean, the development, once it's paid its proportionate share, assuming it's a single phase development, the mindset is it's all done. That they've got their approvals and there's no way of coming back to get them. So that's, the maintenance aspect, that's the challenge that the county has and the city and the Department of Transportation is who's going to pay for the maintenance after the fact. So developments come in, they want to have certainty and maintenance is never really an aspect of it. And quite honestly, that's also one of the challenges of dealing with transit. There's all talk of a mobility fee. That how do we get development to pay for transit? And always the big question is, well, how do you maintain transit after the fact? If you pay for a bus, that's great, but who's going to keep driving and pay for a driver? So, from a maintenance perspective, John, I mean that's a challenge that you all have at the end of the day, and Mike, I don't know if you have anything to add on the maintenance side of it.
Typically, when we're working in proportionate fair share for broken road segments, and we've done this quite a few, in the Daytona Beach area, just up the street on LPG Boulevard. If you happen to read the News Journal and you're interested in what's going on, massive growth going out there with Latitudes. You have the Outlet Mall. You have the North American Development Group Mall going in. Now we hear there's another mall or distribution center going in, plus 1, 2, maybe 3 apartment complexes and a grocery store. So that's probably 5 or 6 developments. Each one of them is making a proportionate fair share payment for the road segments that are broken. What we are doing is we're bundling the money to get a project done. And then we'll work on the next project. And right now we're doing an area-wide study of that region to say, okay, once we're done with the project that We currently have designed, have a right-of-way, and we're just waiting for the construction money. Once we're done with that project, what project do we do next? And we did a similar effort here in southeast Volusia probably 10, 15 years ago. It was the Southeast Volusia Regional Transportation Study, where we were trying to project the future growth out 20, 25 years, what road network would be needed to support that growth. And again, we typically work in collaboration with all the cities, the state, to say, okay, what do you envision this area looking at? What is your, I'll go back to my last slide. Maybe we'll end on this. You have to ask yourself, you have to answer the fundamental question, what is your quality of life? And how do you want that? Do you want asphalt to asphalt roads, 8 lanes? I love asphalt, the smell of new asphalt. I'm a road builder, okay? That may not be you. And I accept that. That's great.
This is the slide you were talking about, John, right up here.
Yes. Well, no, actually the last one. The sunset.
This one.
I too grew up on the beach. It was the west coast of Florida. So this is the Gulf of Mexico, my beach. My quality of life at the time.
Okay, on that note, I want to thank everybody for coming out. You guys are super engaged. You stuck through it for 8:04 now, so we're at overtime right now. I just want to go ahead and a couple more points as we close out here. If you want to watch this entire session again, if you're like, what was it that Steve said about this? This little podium right here with the little black can on top, that's a camera. We've been live streaming the session on YouTube, and you can go to the city's YouTube channel to watch the entire session and all of the past CCR sessions as well for a review in the lead up to the program wrap up in November 27th to get a little refresher if you plan on coming out to that. Second thing, I forgot to mention, the flyers there on your tables, that's in reference to the Turnbull Creek Water Quality, Wildlife Habitat, Natural Areas Protection Bonds. It's the only municipal referendum, the only New Smyrna Beach specific thing that's going to be on your general election ballot. I encourage you to pick it up, take it home, go to the website on it, and learn more about it. Thank you for coming, everybody. Have a great night.